everybody. I am here today with the National LGBTQ Task Force Executive Director, Kierra Johnson. I am so excited that we got to sit down with you. It's been a journey because you are a busy lady.
I'm so glad we could do it too. So glad.
Me too. So I recently got the opportunity to experience my first creating change. So I want to talk to you about that incredible machine that is creating change. But I want to just get to know you a little bit better and introduce our audience too that may not be familiar with your work because you certainly are not, the new kid on the block. Your work is incredibly impressive. And I think I've seen that you've worked on just about every coast with some major organizations. You've been recognized by major organizations, been a part of huge things like the huge women's march, like that. Do you ever just like sit back and are like, wow? Like does it does it because it's easy for other people to be impressed by us and we're like, "Oh yeah." And then you're like, "I just do the thing and feed 3 kids and try to get out of the door and make sure there's not like gum in my hair." And and then hopefully my coffee is warm. So sometimes you don't sit down to just think about the enormity of the work that you're doing. Does it ever just like hit you driving to work to the office in the morning? Like does it hit
You
you?
know, it's so funny. You just like mapped out my life. Like it's like literally like I'm just trying to like make it day
Yep.
by day and do some good work along the path. And like there are those moments where, you know, you get to sit down, nobody's calling you, nobody needs you. You've got these moments of quiet. I mean, like literally around you, but internally they don't
Yeah.
come often for me. But um, where it's wow, this
I
is
did that.
cool. I get to live a really sweet life where I get to engage and think with really brilliant people, and I get to come face to face with some of my supreme
Yeah. Total
just
fangirl.
idols,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
yeah, and like fangirl over them and participate in actions and campaigns that are actually doing something, right?
Right.
That are making impact. Well, that is really cool. It's like, when I got an opportunity to sit on a stage with Miss Major and then hang out with her, right? Like in her, in her room, and we're talking about, not work. We're just talking about life. Like those moments, like, damn, like that's pretty special,
I
right?
did the
And
same thing. I
yeah,
actually got to go up and hang out with her in her room, and when I walked out of the room into the hallway, I, like, burst into tears. And
yeah,
I'm typically not that person, but it just was, I don't know, beyond my wildest expectations of this life, I think. And to just I mean, you do. You have those moments that are just like,
definitely, definitely.
So, I was as I was, like, thinking through what, like, my introduction to who you are and what you do would be, I realized there's, like, just a lot of words that you could use to describe your work, and, I mean, like, you're certainly an activist, you're an executive, I've actually had the opportunity to speak to a lot of Black queer women in, like, publishing and communications and journalism recently, which I would say your work is a lot of that also, honestly. So, what do you call yourself? Like, what do you feel like what your work is, what you do? What genre do you put yourself in? Because it's all of the things.
Yeah. You know, I think my calling
Mm,
is meeting people where they're at and opening doors for people to walk through, right? That
absolutely.
wouldn't have otherwise found their way in,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's kind of been who I've been my whole life. Um,
That was
I
literally going to be
did.
my next question because I feel like that's either in you or it's not. Like I feel like this work is a part of
Yeah.
your DNA or it isn't.
Yeah, I remember in undergrad, I was a teaching assistant for the pre-collegiate program,
Mm.
right? And then my first job was in the reproductive health rights and justice movement. And then right now I'm a gay for pay. And in
It's
all
like
of
say
those
I'm gay for a
spaces,
living.
I it's like being able to deeply connect with people, right? And talk about challenging, complex, uncomfortable um issues, topics, feelings in ways that bring people in and not like inspire like a resistance, I think is who it's kind of a transferable skill, right? Or strength or asset that um has aided me in all like in every aspect of my career for the last
Right.
25 years, from being an organizer to doing fundraising to be an executive to public speaking, to talking to people in the deep south and the midwest and on the coasts, right? Like being
Yeah.
able to authentically connect with people and be able to bring them in with you in ways that creates new ahas and new potential opportunities and possibilities. It goes a long way.
It does. So it's interesting. Like all of the spaces that you just mentioned are typically cis, white, male generated spaces. And, I do this work too. So I don't think you can be a Black woman and do any of those things and not be familiar with stepping into spaces with a bunch of people that typically don't look like you. Um, it's not easy. It's exhausting.
For sure.
Um, it's scary, not in like a fear kind of way, but it's like almost in an overwhelming sort of way. Like I mean, and obviously you've mastered navigating those spaces. I don't think you could possibly be where you are if you haven't. But like, what has that experience been like for you? Because I imagine the more that your career has elevated, the more often you're in those spaces.
I think, yeah, you already know. Like there's so much in that, and it is not easy. And I think the first piece of it is I don't know if you ever master it.
Hmm.
um I think part of what is helpful for me is that I always, right, I'm reminded that there is no right mastering of that. It is a constant evolution, a
Fair.
constant practice. It's a constant leveling up. It's a constant attention to like healing my own traumas, right?
Yes.
And centering my own energy and prioritizing and acknowledging my own agency and power, right? Like it's a constant process that I like, that I feel like it's not even it's a way of living. It's a way
Yeah.
of being, right?
Yeah.
Like we choose every day to be, right? And how we choose to be, right? Like it is an active, right, decision that we make every day and every moment of every day.
Hmm.
And having, chosen family around me that, hold me accountable, but also help me, that remind me I'm not crazy. I'm
And get
not
it. Yeah, they get
paranoid.
it.
It's
Yeah.
not in my head,
Right.
right? Like that,
Yeah.
right? Like folks that I can constantly be learning from, people who give me tough love that are like, okay, so yeah, racism and keep
Right.
it moving.
Go
Like
back.
it's
Go back
yeah,
in.
like right. Like you is there a special Shangri-La? Like, you do you know the path to Wakanda that we don't know about? Like, so yes, this is all real and true. And that doesn't change the fact that you are still here and in it and have work to do. And so some days are harder than others, honestly, Tam. Like
Yeah.
there are days where I feel like nailed it, right? Like I
Right.
rock
I
that
did
shit,
that. Right.
Yeah. And then there are other times where I feel completely defeated and I fall into those like, am I doing the right work? Am I the right person for this time? Does my leadership still matter, right? In this moment? All those things, that's never gone away. It
Yeah.
doesn't hijack me in the same way that it did when I first came into the work, right? Like I don't spin in it
Right.
for as
Right.
and I'm
No
not
spiral.
debilitated.
Yeah. No
Yeah, but
spiral.
it's there. It's still there.
So I want to ask you this question because I feel like you're going to have a very interesting answer. I feel like you are. Do you struggle with imposter syndrome?
Of course. Of course. We
Really?
of course.
I find
Yeah.
that so hard to believe.
No, man. Like look, this is just there. We none of us have escaped the culture and politics and history of the context that we're in,
That's right.
right? Like, and as Black people, as queer people, as women, as femme of center people, as like all of that stuff, like we have been told we don't matter, we don't exist, we're not worthy, right? We're less than, we can't do it, right? Like and that we see it, hear it, right? Taste
Yep.
it, smell it,
It's
bathe in
ingrained.
it.
It's
Like,
ingrained in culture.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying in that it's there. But it doesn't hijack me in the same way as it used to, right? Like I've got tools and experiences and a network of like brilliant, badass people around me
Right.
that help, right? Like I know how to access those things. And my own, again, agency and power that helps me pull myself out of that so that I don't drown in it. But hell yeah.
Oh,
Hell
that's so
yeah.
interesting. That's so interesting. I think it's important for powerful women to be able to have that conversation because I think that there's a thought process that at some point you like price out of it. Like you get to a certain position, you get to a
Yeah.
certain salary, you get whatever that you like age out of it, you price out of it, you grow out of it. So I just think it's extremely interesting to hear the answer to that question from people because some people say no. They say, no, I step into the rooms, I knew I earned my position there and whatever. So it's
Yeah.
always interesting to me to have that conversation with folks and to see who says yes and who says no.
Yeah, it is definitely I mean it really I thank the little baby Jesus for therapy.
Amen.
It really helps
Amen.
a lot. Having, executive coaches along the way, right?
Hmm.
Having, again, peers who I look up to and am in awe of who also say, yeah, I have imposter syndrome. I'm like
Really?
what?
You
So it also gives you permission to feel it and
Yeah.
also not expend energy feeling guilty about it. Because that's
Right.
the
Which is a
other
whole
thing.
other
We
thing.
feel it.
Right.
Yeah. And then and then we feel guilty about feeling the thing. And it's like nobody's got enough energy
For
to
all
be
that.
feeling all of that and then guilty about all of that. Like, no.
No, that's
So
silly.
yeah, yeah. And that's why I say it, because I want people to know like that's just real for me. And in a town like DC and in the nonprofit like professional world, um, you know, I didn't graduate from undergrad. Like I don't have a degree, right? And for the longest time, like I was so ashamed, I mean, deeply
Yes.
ashamed
Yep.
and figured like I'm not going to be able to be a success because of it, right? Like
Yeah.
I have
There's a
no
ceiling.
business.
There's this ceiling that you
Yeah,
feel like I'm
yeah,
gonna do things, but like there's just gonna be a point that I cannot
yep.
travel beyond. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And then, it's you hit this point where you're like meeting all of these people, and frankly, not a lot of men who don't have degrees who are doing these amazing things, right? And more and more women talking about their journeys and that they are not linear traditional lines.
Right.
And again, it gives you permission to be like,
Wait,
I got all I need. I just took a non-traditional path. And
that's right.
that's not only okay, it's actually an asset.
Absolutely, because experience is invaluable. Like, you can there's no, we are the expert of our own experiences, one of my friends likes to say, and it's the truth, and that I think that maybe that thing that you were talking about being able to pull people into you, um, may be sourced from that, honestly, because I think that that's that thing, to be able to recognize other people's experience and the value in other people's experience in ways that when,
Yeah.
you get that academic sort of, superiority complex,
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
lose that. I think you lose that to a degree. It keeps you
I think
humble.
that's right.
Keeps you human. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm glad we went in that direction because I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know that
My
about you.
cat wants to say hi. Hi. Say
Oh
hi.
my
There
God,
she
we
is.
almost have a twin. That's so funny.
Oh shoot, he's stuck on me. I'm sorry. He just jumped up here. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to do
Oh,
important things.
he's important things. That's all.
He
It's like
definitely
kids.
thinks so. He does
It's
not
like
care.
kids. Yeah, they don't care what's going on.
No.
Okay, so this conference. So this was my first year experiencing creating change, and I have planned a lot of big things, but I don't know that I've ever been a part of a machine that was that big. Like, I mean, like, I can't even, I mean, and I got to meet a bunch of people on the team and they're all lovely and very capable, clearly. But like, that's a big machine.
Yeah.
How do you feel like your team, which is not nearly as big as people would suspect it is based on what you've created there, how do you think your team has the capacity in the midst of all the other things that you
Yeah.
do all the rest of the year to even like logistically pull off something that big? I mean, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people and things and sessions happening simultaneously in all different
Yeah.
directions and places. Like, how do you think your team has the capacity to even make that happen?
Magic? I
I
don't
like that
know.
answer. That might be the only answer.
I mean, we are a movement of rainbows and unicorns.
So
So
there's right there.
magic is a
It's the
thing.
thing.
I I mean, for real, it is a labor of love. And I'm so you know, grateful that the predecessors, those who came, from the task force, through the task force before us, right, that visioned and were the architects, right, of this. um I don't even like to call it a conference. It's so funny. Like I talk about it as an ecosystem when I'm
Yeah,
talking
it's like a
about
city. It's like it's a
yeah,
city within itself.
absolutely. um the foundation is so um strong, and it's meeting a community need, and it has met a community need for over 35 years, right?
Which
And
is
it
incredible.
just brings continues to bring people back, but it also continues to bring new people in.
Right.
And someone described it almost like life cycles, right? Like people
Hmm.
come in as new activists, and then people come in as entry level staff people in positions, and then people come back as like
Yeah, that's wild.
teachers and mentors and
Yeah.
like presenters, and people come back as philanthropists, right? And like, so we've got folks who are in so many aspects, who serve so many different functions across the country, right? From nonprofit work to philanthropic work, from um, other sub movements within the social justice movement. We've got
Hmm.
students and professors and sex workers and entertainers and Congress people or elected officials.
Right.
And it it takes a it takes a village, right? So there is like who we have on staff, but it's also who we're in relationship with across the country and
Right.
in movement, who dig in with us, right?
Yeah.
Folks that not just paid folks, right? There's a lot of paid folks that come in, right, and do various things like interpretation
Right.
or run the game room, or um, you know, uh, our talent on the stage, right? But then we also have a ton of dedicated volunteers who just show up
Right.
and share their brilliance and expertise and networks with us because this space matters. This ecosystem matters so much.
Right. I was consistently, and mind you, there's always people that are not going to be happy. There's always a base that is not covered. There's always a box that is not checked. It's inevitable in anything that large. With that being said, I was consistently impressed with how culture, diversity, disability, um, even neurodivergence was prioritized. Like it was in a way that I have never seen in that kind of setting. Um, can you talk to me about like the way that the interpreters were really highlighted? Because I've planned a lot of events and interpreters often are like, this is important, we have to have them, but they're like in the corner and the lighting's not always great and whatever. And then you're like last minute, they're like, no, we needed 6 people for this amount of time, not three. So like you really didn't do a great job. Like I was consistently impressed with how all of the people that brought that element were so incredibly prioritized. Like the videos prior to each event that talked about like how to speak in order for the interpreter to really be able to catch the things that you were saying. The
Mm.
videos that were the production work that was backstage, to be able to the spaces for like quiet room spaces and relaxation spaces. Like I've never encountered that anywhere else to that degree, I don't think. Can you talk to me about like what prioritizing, first of all, like what it means to the organization, to the conference, why it's important to you, like, and like what that looks like in terms of, I just, it was incredibly impressive to me.
Um, that first, I just want to say, it feels really good to hear you say it. Um, I think oftentimes we crave space where we feel wholly seen. And then we get it. And because it feels so good, we take it for granted.
Yeah, no,
Right?
truly,
Like, which is
truly.
good, right? Like, it's like, um, quick story. Gloria Steinem was asked a question. I love this in an interview, and somebody was like, "Well, Gloria, do you think girls today are entitled, right? Like girls, it seems like girls, are more and more entitled." And Gloria sits back, she takes a breath, and she goes, "Well, if they're not, that means we're not doing our jobs because they should be in like taking basically what we've already got for granted as the bar, as the
Yeah,
lowest bar, and fighting for more, right?" So she was like, "I hope they're entitled. I hope they feel like they deserve everything that we've been fighting for up until this point so that they can shoot for a beyond."
yeah.
And that's how I feel about I want people to be like, this is how this shit's supposed to feel, right? Like to some
Right.
degree, but I also want people to know it wasn't by accident. It wasn't organic. It doesn't not cost,
Oh
right? Like
no,
a
that
lot.
has to be purposeful. Like that, I mean,
It's
like it was really significant. Like even just the like I have never been in a space where there were people speaking multiple languages and you had
yeah,
to wait until they spoke fully in whatever their native tongue is, and then you heard the English version. Like there's
yeah,
always some way that the English is prioritized, some way. And like the
yeah,
fact that we were asked to sit and listen to someone speak in whichever way they were comfortable, and
yeah.
then we were like secondarily told what they like, that to me was so incredibly important. And I don't recall ever being in a space where the English language wasn't even out of the country, where the
Yeah.
English language wasn't prioritized. Like that, those things had to clearly be purposeful.
Yeah. And it really is. We take building community seriously, right? And so we have to be responsive. So I also don't want to like fake the funk and be like, cause we just roll like that.
Right.
It is it is a constant, right? Like it is again, it's an ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Like depending on how much rain you get, right? Like the soil, right, adjusts accordingly, right? And plants,
Right.
right? Like they adapt, right? Like so that's how it is with, for us too. There are moments where, right, folks in the community are like, this is not enough, or we got to
Right.
do it differently, or you didn't show up. And we hear that and figure out like, how do we, how do we, create, fine tune, recalibrate, grow, evolve, adapt to meet the changing needs of our community year after year. And so there's a level of responsiveness, right? It's like we're talking to people all the time and trying to figure out, like, how do we do this differently, and how do we continue leveling up? Like, let's like pop our collars, and let's
Keep
be,
going.
in a humble space and
Yeah.
continue to learn, and share what we're learning to then be able to create the space that is needed for justice work. I
Right.
mean, it's important because, I mean, this country is changing and the demographics are changing, and somehow still the rising demographics and electorate is still in the periphery, right? Like we are
Right.
still invisibilized, silenced, ignored, minimized, at the least, right? And so, how, if our value is centering, right, like the most targeted, attacked, marginalized, under resourced, then we got to do the work to show it, right? Like not
Right.
just be doing that with, for, outside of us folks, right? Like, but we got to be figuring out, how do we do that internally, how do we
Right.
build with community, and you know bounce back from missteps along the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 No, it was incredible. I was incredibly impressed by it in a way that I seek to emulate it in the things that I do because I some of the things I wouldn't have even thought about. And so I was super impressed. Along the same lines and reading up about the conference before I came, I read the story about how Creating Change was supposed to be in New Orleans. Um, and then COVID, and pandemic and all of the things, but it was prioritized to go back anyway. And I don't think that I often hear that happen either. Like kind of it's just typically like the snowball keeps snowballing and then, we
Right.
kind of go where the way. So, but it was a conscious choice by the organization to go back there because they felt like it was important, that you felt like it was important, and I thought that was kind of profound. Can you talk to me a little bit about why New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans, also a magical place with a deep
Incredible.
history, of resilience and activism and resistance, and queer liberation, um, and a deep, rich cultural and racial history.
Absolutely.
It was a place that we had been talking about for a long time, and we were all super excited to be going, when the pandemic hit, and because we had already been planning, we were also already beginning to build relationships, right?
Right,
Like, so when the opportunity, so when we had to, in our negotiations, and the biggest negotiation was like with our hotel vendor, right?
right,
Like
mhm.
among some other folks that we had started moving contracts with, that we wanted to come back, and what could we figure out? We know
Yeah,
we can't come, and we want to bring, right, all of this beauty, love, joy, money, right,
right,
visibility
right,
to this place. What can we, like, let's figure out a plan. And we did. And just to be fair, a lot of vendors and hotels and like, they weren't interested in working. Like, I mean, and for good reason. Like, folks are trying to figure out how they were gonna make it, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
um, and they did, right? Like they really like they got in there with us to figure out, okay, all right, so if you're serious, then let's just keep this contract and roll it forward,
that's awesome.
and then let's try it again in a few years. And it worked itself out, and I'm so glad that that we did because it has to have been one of the best conferences we've ever had.
I mean, you're right. New Orleans is just such a magical place all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
probably my favorite city outside of DC maybe in the whole country. And it just has so much of a personality of its own.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was an incredible experience, like being able to step out of the conference and then go walk to like I walked to the square where enslaved people used to gather. I mean like
Yeah.
the mile and a half walk from the hotel or whatever to just stand there and like be in the space and like touch the ground and breathe the air and whatever. And it was like in that moment for me that I was like, oh yeah, this had to be here. Like
Mm.
this is just it's part of
Yep.
it's part of the deal. Like it was incredible. So I just think it was awesome that you circled back because I know that there's probably a decent amount of reasons not to. Like that, you
Yeah.
know, that you just kind of keep planning with whatever's in front of you and whatever. So I just think it was really I appreciate the fact that you circled back. And I'm sure New Orleans does as well. And then there were like
Oh God.
protests. Like there were protests happening in the French Quarter. Like I joined a protest. Like I was like, this is it's the best day ever. It was
No,
great.
it really is an ecosystem. That's what it's like a I don't know. There's just nothing like it. Like I said, I hate calling it a conference because anyone who has been a part of it in any configuration will testify, right,
Yeah.
to the need for a space where people can build. And I mean, build relationships, build self esteem, build their knowledge, right? Build campaigns. There have literally been organizations that were built there that
Right.
were birthed
Hmm.
afterward, right? Like it is I don't know. I feel so honored and lucky to be a part of this legacy and continuing it forward and in the coming years, right? Like we're going to continue leveling up and being responsive to the community based on what the new needs are and the new landscape is in this country and hopefully continue to keep, you know, creating impact wherever the conference is, but also throughout the year connecting to these people on these issues, right, and programs.
I think that the most uh significant part of the whole week for me was just being in community and being in space with so many other black and brown queer people. Like outside of maybe like a pride situation, you very
Mm-hmm.
rarely get to be in that concentrated of a space with um for black and brown folks and then also people which may not always be true for pride people doing the work which I think is a entirely different end of the
Yes.
spectrum than you sometimes run into in a concentrated space of us so I think that was the thing that was most impactful for me personally being a part of it and I know this is an incredibly hard question to even ask you but like what are you the most proud of like when it comes
Ooh.
to like when the week is over and you finally get to breathe and like you're on a plane and you get 5 seconds to like be inside your own head, like what are you the most proud of?
I have extreme pride when the staff is beaming,
Mm,
right? To hear the staff talk about what they were able to do and positive in this like prideful, like we did that,
yeah.
right? Like can't wait to figure out how we're going to do this next year, right? This ownership, this
Yeah.
like when I hear because it's a doozy, like the staff is like working on like fumes by
Oh
the
yeah,
end, right? And so to
absolutely.
be in that space on the other side feels really, really good. And then to hear from participants, right? Like folks like yourself who it's the first time, folks who have been like, this is my 20th, you know,
Right.
creating change, folks from, you know, the coast or in a town in the Midwest, Southwest, or the deep South, right? Like when I hear things like, and I had this conversation with someone one night, they were sitting at the bar and they're like, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And she was like, "I wasn't sure about this conference. I had a lot of like question marks. I wasn't sure if I could, right, like whether or not
Yeah.
this was going to be a space for me." And she was like, "I'm so glad I came, and I trust your staff and I trust your leadership. Thank you
Oh,
so
that's
much."
big.
Yeah, man. And to have people say this from very different like points of view and vantage points and experiences. Like it's not like one cut of people, right?
Yeah, no,
Like
that's big time.
I had a young person, they're not even 21 yet, give me the biggest hug, like in tears, like just like, "Thank you so much. I'm so glad I'm here." And I was like, "That is great." Or an elder, right? Like lesbian in her 60s, right? To be like, "Thank you for this programming. We really needed this programming, and I'm really glad to see it here this year." So, right, like to be able to create an ecosystem that can hold that broad of diversity,
Yeah.
to experience the challenges and missteps, right, and stumbles, and still have that be the premier primary experience of people. That's what it is. It's not like a single piece of it. It's like the experience held as a whole. When it's that, I'm like, say less. I'm good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
So I really, really, really personally enjoyed your conversations with Miss Major on stage. Like, it was I really enjoyed them, and selfishly, I have to be honest, I was extremely interested in having this conversation with you because I was really curious if you felt like the same person one-on-one as you felt on the stage, because you come across as so incredibly authentic and genuine, like, on a stage, and that's not easy to do. Like, I've been on a stage, and I've been on a stage with a lot of people, and it's not easy to come off as, like, not rehearsed,
Yeah.
um, not, like, very teleprompter-y, or, like, I have this speech in my head that I have to get out, so, like,
Yeah.
delivering lines, and you came across so incredibly natural, and it felt so authentic and real that I was really curious if you would feel like the same person there as you do here, and you do, which is remarkable. Like, it's really remarkable, and like, is that just do you think that's just personality? Is it, like, just practice? Is it comfortability with yourself, and so you're just able to communicate that in whichever, like, if it's one-on-one compared to on a stage? Like, I was super curious just to see if you felt the same, or if that was, like, you're on stage, because
Mhm.
we've all met people that have, like, they're on
Yeah.
stage, and it seems genuine, but it's their on stage sort of persona, and then when you meet them in a different environment, it feels different, but you literally feel exactly the same. Like,
Yeah.
why do you think that is?
Um, I think it's a little bit of all of what you said. So
Okay.
some of it is just experience,
Mhm.
right? Like having done it. Um, Definitely practice,
Mm.
right? Like, which is connected to the experience
Right.
piece, right? Like being in conversation with folks in different venues and
Right.
spaces. Um, I think you know, it's also this goes, I think, for me, back to the work, the really intentional work I do on myself,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
early in my career, I had convinced myself that I needed to show up like other people. Like I need to do it like them. I
Right.
need to sound like them. I need to dress like her. I need to, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's
number
what they
one, you
teach
just,
you. That's
right.
that's what you're taught, even by
Yep.
people who do this work. They will teach you
Yep.
that that's what you do.
Yep. And you can only be you. Like that's the thing. And so if you're you acting like somebody else, you're already one step removed from your authenticity,
Right, right.
right? And through a lot of just work and like being in real conversation with others, right, who are in the work. And I think also age, right? Like where I just, getting to a place where it's like I really energy I I only have so much of it in a given day.
Right.
You
And do you want to
like
spend it on pretending to be somebody else?
I just not interested. And I'm not for everybody. Nobody is. And I what I know is that I'm the most impactful when I am in my own skin. Like
Yeah.
when I am just who I am, right? Like and of course always trying to bring my best self. I'm not saying I'm not trying to not try to change or not trying
Right.
to evolve or
Right,
right.
right.
Like of course. I'm dedicated to my profession, and that also means like continuing to learn how to
Right.
show up and do and be better.
Right.
But as me, right? Like what that means
Right.
for me.
Right.
So yeah, like I'm like, like and I've gotten critiques, right? And sometimes they're helpful and I internalize them and figure it out. And sometimes I'm like, I don't care, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you think, right? Like you joke too much, you laugh too much, people aren't going to take you seriously. You cuss too much, you're too loud, you're too verbose, you're too informal, you're too like your
Yeah.
outfits are too sexy. You need to,
Right.
right? Like
Right. Right.
these things, and I just a lot of that stuff. I'm like, I'm not
You'll
going to
be all
cuss
right.
at
You'll be all right.
maybe at
Right.
church, although I think I've probably done something at a religious institution where I did because I had it. But
It happens.
um yeah, so I think it's a little bit of all of that. And then it's also like who I'm around too. That's a
Mhm.
part of it too. Like the energy that I get from people, like that is a thing for me. Like I am a like this I am a right like I'm a Gemini. I'm also from the South. So this like call response like symbiotic like thing like it's my jam. Like that's what it is.
Like
And
when
like
you're
so
having
with
a
Miss
conversation with somebody there you're very impressed with, but they cuss and you're like,
Yeah,
yeah.
that part right there. I was like, okay, we're gonna be friends. Okay,
That's what
I can
okay.
now I can relax because I'm not worried about how many cuss words come out. Now it's like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
can do that. Well, and it's like with Miss Major, like Miss Major, she is an icon, right? And we've been in situations where certain icons need a lot more from us, right?
Hmm.
Like they've got a lot of needs. That's hard for me. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with like you need. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
Miss Major's not one of those people. What she needs is real. She needs to be able to be real, and she needs whoever's engaging with her to be
And we'll
real.
call you out if you
Done.
don't in a second.
Check.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm good. So in that kind of space, I'm like, this is like, it doesn't get any better than this because we're just gonna keep being us,
Right.
and people are gonna feel the way they feel about it. But what they will undeniably get real and authenticity.
Yeah, I mean, it
And
reads
so,
like it really like I was in my last life, I was a public relations person, and that was the thing. Like a lot of PR people will try to get you to look and sound and be someone else, and that never works. I mean, it may
mm-hmm,
work temporarily, but it really doesn't work with any longevity because that comes across. Like if you are
yep,
playing at being whoever it is that you're supposed to be, no matter how good
right,
of an actor, there's cracks there. And
yep,
so those people, I mean, I think that's why I recognize it because like those people that can come forth with like true authenticity, I think are always the most powerful. And like I said, so I was super interested to be in a room with you because I just was curious if it translated and it absolutely does. I mean, honestly, like that's not knowing you at all. Like that is one of the things that I'm probably the most impressed with because everybody doesn't have that. And that's a really big deal. Like that's a really big deal being able to be as strong and as powerful and impactful, but also simultaneously being exactly who you are. Like that's huge. Like that's huge. So props to you for that because
thank
that's that's
you.
incredible. Like you just don't come across it very often. It's incredible. Like you can tell when people are pretending, even if they mean it.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
tell. And so
yeah.
that's huge. So feel you.
Thank
It makes me,
you.
I had a lot of your staff tell me that you're the reason that they came to um
Oh, you're gonna
the
make me
task force.
cry. Stop it. Stop it.
Truly, like I had several of your staff tell me that you're the reason why they came, that you're the reason why they moved to the task force, and now I understand why. Like that's now I get it. Get it.
And that really means something, right? Like, so when I think about like motivators, right? You asked me a question about like awards, accolades, how I've
Mm,
been kind of like these things that I have access to or had, right? And I think that's not the motivator. This is the motivator.
right.
It's like, I want to do right by my people, right? Like, I want for people to who engage with the task force, and that is right on staff, on the board, but also like participate in anything that we're doing, to feel like, yep,
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
right there, like I'm she did it. That is why I'm here. This is what
Absolutely.
we need to be doing, saying, thinking, feeling, expressing, right? That's the motivator for me. So that's great.
Well, good. On those bad days, make sure you take that with you because it's a very big deal. It's hard. It's very hard to find. The other thing that I really noticed you like working into a lot of your different like speaking speeches and introductions and whatever was sort of this concept of, uh, I want to make sure that I verbalize it correctly. This concept of like right now, we need to figure out how to hold on to community even when we are coming from drastically different experiences and have different sort of agendas and priorities. Like we need to figure out how to stay in community with that, even because of that, like
Yeah.
the place we are in the world right now, we have to figure out how to work with that, work around it, integrate it in somehow and still be able to stay in community. And I thought that it was such an
Yeah.
interesting sentiment because I don't know that I've necessarily heard anyone say it in that way because a lot of times things like that feel very dismissive. Like it
Yeah.
feels like you're saying like, okay, you have this little racism problem, but like we have bigger fish to fry. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times that's
Yeah,
what it feels
totally.
like. That's what
Yeah.
it feels like. And that feels super dismissive and then folks get combative and whatever. But the
Hmm.
way that you sort of expressed it, and often, like I feel like I heard you talk about that more than maybe any other particular other thing. And it was
Yeah.
interesting in that space because there were funders in that space. There were executive directors in that space. There were politicians in that space. There were,
Yeah.
frontline testers in that space. There were all of the people. And so, obviously, inevitably, especially within communities, like small communities, like in your town, there is tons of that. I know that when I was working in the grassroots sector, like it was a constant issue because like I
Hmm.
do the magazine, but I also am a DEI consultant. So I teach and I lecture and I whatever about these things. And most of what I talk about is intersectionality and how it's such an incredible struggle when you live in that bubble in between, like feeling like too black to be fully considered in the queer community, too queer to be fully considered in the black community. And so you live in this weird space. And the people who live in that bubble are often the ones that are expected to put whatever they're experiencing like on hold for the greater good. And that
Hmm.
very rarely goes over well. And it's why things break down and communities break down and partnerships break down and all of the things. Like I've seen it in real time happen often. And like I said, any other time that I've heard that sort of discussed, it's always felt very dismissive. And the way that you introduced it, and I think that it also kind of came back up in the conversation with about fascism and democracy, maybe that panel. I feel like it also
Hmm.
surfaced there in ways. um, can you just like, so obviously you brought it up up enough times that I can tell that it's something that you believe in and it matters to you. Can you just talk
Yeah.
to our audience about that a little bit? Because I just, like I said, I've never seen it presented in a way that didn't feel dismissive. And it
Yeah.
almost helped me to understand the importance of it in a different kind of way because I'm usually one of those people's like, wait a minute, like
Mm-hmm.
you can't, not gonna put baby in a corner. Like we're not gonna, we're not, whatever. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Principled struggle was
Mm,
the kind of phrase
yes.
um, that I used, and I'm obsessed. I am obsessed because I think it. I, I'm like, this is me. This is it. This
Yeah.
is it. These are the
The
two
thing.
words. I'm like, thank you so much. And probably part of what's resonating is kind of where, this uh, pedagogy, I guess, if you will, is emerging from. So, right. So, the way I was introduced to it was folks who have been practicing and teaching and learning about it through BYP 100,
Hmm.
right? Highlander, um, Black Lives Matter, right? Like these, like folks of color, many of whom are queer, many who identify as women, many who come from the Midwest and South, right? Like, um, where principled struggle is just a part of our existence, right? Like I'm so grateful for the language and for the, again, like I said, the pedagogy that is emerging about it. But I also think for some of us, like principled struggle was a part of surviving, right?
Right.
And then it became a part of how you build a base and organize, right? So being a Black queer woman who was born in Valdosta and lived, right, most of my younger, right, life in outside of Atlanta, right? Like there are lots of, right, divergent ideas, right? Like
Absolutely.
Southern Baptist mores are just in the air, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you're surrounded by folks who have very different political, right, foundations.
Hmm.
Navigating these things with parents, right, like who come from even, right, a more,
Right.
right, like conservative
Right.
background. So learning like disagreement and staying committed to each other and like in a loving relationship with each other, in friendship with each other, as neighbors with each other, like I feel like I learned that from a very young age,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
so I think principled struggle is is so critical in these times, and can really, if we lean into it, has the potential to transform us as a people. And we live in this time, like I think about the last 7 8 years, like under the Trump administration, we saw the disintegration of the truth. Like what is the truth,
Right. What
right?
at this
Like
point, what's
you
real?
could literally
Right.
have what happened and someone say no it didn't, and it's like, well,
You didn't.
that might be your truth, but this is my truth. It's like, no, but this is literally the thing that happened. They're like, yep, that's not my truth, right? So there's
Right.
this, right? You've also got 2.5 years where we weren't engaged with each other and became, right, I think, disconnected from our own humanity and the humanity of other people,
Right.
right? And then we've got the proliferation of social media, right? The digital age,
Which
where on
further.
one hand, right, like we're closer together, but when you look at how algorithms work within social media platforms, it's actually shrunk our worlds.
Right.
So we're actually not engaging with people who don't think like us and forced to like figure that, right? Like how to
Mm-hmm.
be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think that combination of things, and not to mention all of the data is saying we have shorter and shorter attention spans. So if we're looking at headlines and then we are judge and jury,
Yeah,
right? Like we're
absolutely.
like, we don't even know what the thing is about, but we
Nope.
read the
Absolute
headline and we like,
clickbait.
we about to off
Share.
with their head, or you're the best person in the world, share.
Yep.
And so it's created, right, this culture where it's like you're either with me or you're against me,
Absolutely.
right? You are right or you are wrong. This is black or this is right, right? You are a villain or you're the hero. You're an
Right.
angel or you're a hellion, right? Like, and this dichotomy literally is destroying movements. There is no movement that has been impactful that has ever existed that didn't have di- divergent points of view and great, right? Like greatness. That that's how they became great, right?
Right.
Like that's literally the dissension is how you get to what actually makes sense and works and the evolution and you break new things open. And it's destroying us. Like I say all the time, my grandmother would be listen,
Right.
some of the things she has said about queer people, some of the things she has said about immigrants, some of the things like, and I love that woman. I love her. Like, can't nobody talk about Miss Solomon, okay? Um, and I have hard conversations with her, and she's moved a lot on
Yeah.
things, right? Like, but there's no canceling Miss Solomon out. Like that's my boo for life, right? And so how do we do that, right? I've been really, even after the statement we made right before creating change, there were people that were really upset about our Israel Palestine statement, and
Right.
I've been in some really powerful and I would even say transformative conversations in
Mm.
a practical, like practically engaging principled struggle where I'm learning, they're learning. There is an openness to hear because there is a certain level of commitment to the organization and the work of the organization. Like we've got a
Right.
common love. We can literally disagree, like literally. Like I disagree with you on this thing, and I'm committed to working with you to keep learning and to evolve and to correct missteps or expound, you know what I mean, like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's really powerful. It's really powerful. We actually don't have to agree on all the things,
Right.
and we can meet people where they're at and bring them along with us. I mean, I've literally worked with, I came from abortion rights work, and literally worked with people who weren't sure how they felt about abortion or who were against abortion, met them at the sex education. Yes, we can agree that this is important. And over the course of years, they shifted and moved.
Right. Which doesn't happen if the
Some people,
conversation breaks down.
no, no. And some people didn't move, but they changed their tactics, right? So this is the other piece. There are people I worked with that didn't move on their abortion stance, and in what they stopped doing was demonizing women. They stopped right protesting outside of clinics because they started seeing these women as humans
People.
and
Right.
realized they could actually put more time and effort into, in this case, getting comprehensive sex education funded, not demonizing these women and families
Right.
making this decision. So it
Right.
wasn't, so they didn't change, right,
Their
what they
position.
felt and what
Right.
they believed, but they changed how they showed up in it.
Which
And that
matters.
can't happen. Right. Yeah, it matters. Because
Yeah.
you're not out here telling some woman she's going to hell and she's killing her baby. You're actually talking to the state legislature and you're saying sex education works. Why isn't there enough money in it? That really matters on
That's
so
like,
many
I mean,
levels.
that's really profound. Like, I think the entire concept of it is profound. It's just a very profound conversation, and it's nice to see examples of how it filters down into practice because some of these
Yeah.
conversations can be very like philosophical. But that's a great example of how it filters down into practice so that
Yeah.
that it works if
But you have to be vulnerable. And that's the other thing.
that's the hard
People like
part.
the
Yeah.
the cost of vulnerability has gone up. Like let's be real.
Yeah.
Um and
I think you talked about
also
that as well, right? Like that maybe I can't trust you like 100%, but maybe I can give
Yep.
you like 5%. Like, what
Right.
will
Like
it
let
cost you to
we
give me five?
it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can like,
Yeah, yeah,
we can grow our investment in each other, right? Like, and we don't have to take it all away
right,
either,
right, right, right,
right? It's like, how do we do this? Like, and how do we not get so righteous that it doesn't matter what the other person is saying because we're so committed to saying we're right and being right?
right.
So even, again, like from, the conversations I've been having post, post statement, like, yeah, there are some things I would have done differently. Like, I don't feel defensive about the fact that I think social media was the wrong platform to do
Fair.
that. That I'm a verbose person and I love words and I really believe words matter.
Same.
Um, and social media does is not the platform for nuance and complexity. And so that's just one example. Like, I don't need to just be right. Like, I'm like, yeah, I learned some shit in there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
if I had to do it over, and when we move, as we move forward, that social media will not be the outlet for the level of complexity,
Of
right?
that
When we're
issue.
talking
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
yeah,
No, that makes sense.
yeah.
That makes sense.
So things get missed, right? When you shorthand stuff, then people project, and the narrative, they're left to like,
Tell their own story. Yeah,
well, yeah, and that's on us. We have
yeah.
work to do there. So anyway, I'm really dedicated to it as an individual. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a student.
Yeah,
But I'm also like trying to figure out too, like with the team, like we're talking about how do we create opportunities to practically engage in principled struggle, to exercise that muscle, both internally, but also in how we're doing work with external folks.
yeah. That's incredibly interesting. Like the whole conversation. And now I think that I probably got more out of the plenaries than anything else because like the conversations were just so engaging to me and
Yeah.
just I don't know, you leave with like 1,000 notes and all these things you want to look up and talk about and conversations you want to have. Like just really incredible. That was probably my favorite part of all. Um, okay. So to kind of transition a little bit and wind our way down here, we touched on the environment that we're living in right now, the political environment, the legislative environment, the religious environment, all of the things. Um, are you afraid for us?
um yes, but that's not new.
Mm,
um we've been moving in this direction for a long time. And granted, some people are seeing it for the first time.
right.
The way it's manifesting has definitely intensified. Um, but all the signs have been pointing this to this moment, to these moments for a long time. I've been fearful for a long time. When we lost the right to abortion.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that more people across the board weren't more like I really thought in my, I guess, naivety that when that happened, even if that isn't your issue, that I thought everyone was going to mobilize and then everyone was all of a sudden going to be like, this is the beginning, not the end. Like, what are we doing here? Like, and I was shocked personally that more people didn't seem to connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
I was personally really surprised.
I wasn't. Again, because we've been moving in this direction for such a long time. Um, we have taken funding for education has incrementally decreased year after
Absolutely.
year after year after year after year after year after year. The places where we feel that is we don't attract or retain good teachers. The arts have been decimated, and civics is completely like annihilated,
Right.
right? So people have no they're not learning what their connection is to political power. So when something happens after you've spent 15 years of not understanding or knowing your agency when it comes to the political system, you might be mad, but you don't have a path. Like you're like, oh, but that it's happening to us. Look at this
Yes,
thing that happened to us, and that's friends.
yeah,
So I guess that's what I'm saying. Like I'm scared. And unfortunately, I do believe things are gonna get worse before they get better.
I agree.
And I also believe that we have what we need. Like there's nobody who is going to save us. We are those people.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think the more that becomes apparent, clear, acknowledged, owned, reflected on, internalized, the more we're going to see acts of resistance and organizing and community building and cross movement collaboration and underground um, interventions that support our people, right? Like those things are just going to rise and they're just going to grow. And so and some people, they're like, that's not true. You're just being really Pollyanna about it. But I actually think we're going to be all right. I mean, I think the question is, how soon can we be all right?
yeah.
Like,
That's why I mean, all these things. Like, if you look at history, like all these things, like it's always,
mm-hmm.
history just repeats itself over and over again. So but it scares me as to how bad it's because those things, like we also get lulled into these
Yeah,
false senses of security where things seem pretty sweet for a while, and that's when the bad
yeah,
things start happening. So it gets
mm-hmm.
has to get to a certain level of crisis before people are like, whoa. And I guess I'm in a place where I'm just like, how bad is it gonna get before the direction the wheel starts turning a little bit. But yeah, I agree. Okay, so I
Yeah.
always like to walk away with positive,
All right, let's
with
get
these
it.
heavy conversations that we always end up engaged in. What inspires you? Or who or what is inspiring you right now?
Hmm. You know, I am so inspired by the elders in our movements that
Hmm.
continue to stay in this fight. Like they are in it. I mean, I know a lot of folks are like, look, I've already passed my baton and I'm tired. And
It's
they should be allowed to do that. But there's a gang
absolutely.
of them that's like, okay,
Let's go.
I'm ready. Where
We
I
ride
gotta
at
be.
dawn. Right. Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like like who's the target? What's
Yeah.
the weapon? Where I gotta be? Um, and then that coupled with this emergent like gang of like young people who are unapologetically themselves and unwilling to bow out or to go softly into that good night. Like that's exciting. I'm
It
like,
is. It
oh,
is.
like what is like this is how can I bridge this? This is where I want to be. I want to bridge in like because this is like this energy, this I mean the sheer numbers of people are a force, but then the experiences and tools at their fingertips, right? Like never had all of these tools at our fingertips at the same time.
Right.
And so what's possible, like the idea of what's possible is just oh my God, it gives me like goosebumps. Like I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm really excited. And I'm like, how can I be down? Right. Like, cause I'm a Gen X kid. So we're definitely a bridge. Like we get,
right.
you know, people like to jump right over us all the time. But I think we're a critical part of this equation. I think we are gonna be
The
we're
bridge.
this is we gotta bridge it. We gotta
Yeah,
connect it. I think it's our responsibility. And actually I think we're actually positioned and experienced and skilled with the right things to do it. And then from a personal level, my babies, you know, they're the bomb. I tell people all the time, I don't just love them, I like them. They're
mm,
really fucking cool. Like they're cool kids. They're smart and kind and funny and talented and I just like hanging out with them. Like I like
same,
talking to them. And it's I just feel really lucky. Like I feel lucky
same.
to be in life and in relationship and to get to be their parent and I want to do right by them. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like I want to be like by the time, you know, they're my age, they're like they did that shit. Okay.
Word.
Y'all were a little dicey there for a minute, but you
But
got
we
it
pull it
together, you
around,
know.
right?
Y'all pulled it out. Hey, okay, double overtime, but you did it. So you know, I want to be proud. Like I want my kids to be proud of me and what we did, and yeah,
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 I think that's one of the like being a parent is hard. Hard work. It's hard. However, I think one of the biggest gifts that we get as parents is that sometimes once you hit adulthood, first of all, you forget what it was like to be a kid. Um, but it does allow us to see this new generation, which is why I know we're gonna be okay. Because
yeah,
like these kids are different. Like as poorly as people talk about this younger generation, like these kids are different. Their gender and sexuality is so fluid. They're so unapologetic about who they are. They're so well informed about the things that are going on. Like whatever wonky things happen between like Gen X, Gen Z or Gen X, the millennials and like the early millennials, like whatever complacency lived there, like was shot clean to hell with these young kids. Like they are like,
yep,
no, 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 we mm-mm. So I know once we make it to the point that they're in control, that like even if we haven't cleaned it up by then, they'll fix it. I know they will. Like I believe that they have the power to make everything different. And a lot of times you don't get to see that. You only see like what the
yeah,
media tells you about kids, but when you're a parent,
yeah,
like you get to see how incredibly dope these kids are. And then you're like,
yeah.
see, where all hope is not yet lost. Like there's still so much out there because
Truly,
they are. These kids are incredible. These little
they
kids are
really
flipping
are.
incredible and they keep you going and they keep you motivated even when they're sticky and want stuff and are getting on your nerves. Like they're still pretty freaking awesome.
All of those things. All of those things. Yeah, they're dope. They keep me grounded for sure
Absolutely. And
too. It's
humble.
hard
Kids
to
will keep you
that's
humble.
what I was gonna say. It's hard to like be feeling yourself when you got three youngers, littles reminding you of who you actually are. Yeah,
Right.
it's like right.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, Kira, I just am so incredibly grateful to be able to spend this time with you. I'm so
Thank
incredibly impressed and
you.
grateful for the work that you're doing. Please stay encouraged. We we need you
Thank
out here in these
you.
streets. So, thank you for, a lot of people say no. Like a lot of people are not interested in doing this work that is exhausting and it is hard and it's scary and some days it is not fun whatsoever. Like
Yeah.
it is certainly not awesome interviews and, sound bites and, makeup chairs and runways. This is hard work. So thank you for the work that you continue to do. Thank you for your organization and the work they continue to do. And
Thank you.
really can't wait to see what's next. How do people follow you or the organization or learn more about creating change next year, which I heard is in Vegas? Which is like it's so big and overwhelming. Like I can't even imagine how like 'cause everything's bigger in Vegas. So like I can't even imagine
It's
what
gonna
that's
be
gonna
fascinating. This is
yeah, I
gonna be
can't
fascinating.
even
Good
imagine
times.
what's gonna be like. But how do folks follow you and the organization and learn more about the conference and how to participate and get involved and all of the things?
Yeah, my handles on all the social medias is at Kierra DC. The task force is the task force across all the platforms. Our website, thetaskforce.org. It's an easy way to stay up to date on what's happening, particularly on the federal level on our issues and with our community. But there's also like where you can find information about events and opportunities for volunteering or even jobs. That's yeah, those are the places. Yeah, we're gonna be in Vegas. So if you got folks tuning in from Vegas, like definitely hit us up. We're already building our crew
Nice.
to be working with out there. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to see what's next. And again, thank you so much for your time. I know you are very, very busy.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to connect with you again. Really appreciate this. And you stay in touch and good luck.
Thank you.